is consumed, construction, and transaction of identity in the image economy. I'd like to thank my chair, Bill Peckett, and my committee members, Tiana Vujosevich and Marco Simsik. Hi, I'm Quix2Pick. You've probably heard of me before. In fact, there's a good chance that I'm on your phone right now. I'm a social media giant who has recently merged with e-commerce to provide an integrated social and shopping experience. This means the same place you see and post selfies is the place where you see products and brands to purchase. Because I live on your phone, I'm very good at showing you exactly what you want to see and buy. I listen to the words you speak. I read your text messages and Google searches. I have access to your photos, location, and I've saved your credit card information. I pretty much know everything about you. Gathering this information is essential for me to show you images that you want to consume. Quix2Pick is more than a collection of images. We are, as French theorist Guy Debord asserts in his text Society of the Spectacle, a social relation among people mediated by images. These people include consumers, influencers, and brands. Take Quix2Pick user the Mop Top, for example. She is what is known as an influencer. She has 150,000 followers, or consumers who see her posts, and she posts images of herself, mostly in her home, using the products that she loves. People follow her because they like her style, her personality, and her stuff. They want to consume her images, and they want to be like her. Almost everything in her photos are for sale. The Mop Top is an ad who is a person, or a person who is an ad. Either way, cool, right? For example, here she is using her Oral-T toothbrush in her bathroom. When a user touches the image, this tag appears on the screen. And when they touch the tag, they are taken to the Oral-T page, where they can buy the same toothbrush as the Mop Top, who they have grown to trust and admire. The Mop Top was paid about $10,000 by Oral-T to post that image. Oral-T pays me, Quix2Pick, to host their e-commerce shop. And of course, the consumers pay money to buy the toothbrush. And a cut of their money went to both the Mop Top and Oral-T. So as you can see, there is an entire economy and set of power dynamics on Quix2Pick, mediated entirely through images. The influencer marketing industry is quickly accelerating. According to Business Insider, it is on track to be worth $15 billion by 2022. What makes it so effective is that influencers use their personality and identity to help brands sell products. The influencer's identity is the true commodity that the consumer is buying. Another point about influencers is that anyone can be one. They just need to build an audience and online identity that is valuable to brands. This means, for the first time, content consumers can monetize themselves and cross over to being content creators, all enabled by Quix2Pick's platform of social media mixed with e-commerce. We have ingrained shopping into everyday life so much that people don't just buy brands anymore. Brands also buy people. All that to say, Quix2Pick is thrilled to announce the opening of our flagship image factory to give space to this industry. We are taking over the site of the recently vacated Army and Navy building in New Westminster, which is located southeast of Vancouver in Canada. New Westminster is the fastest growing population in the Lower Mainland. This presents a great opportunity to engage the public in our flagship. The vacant Army and Navy building is located on the bustling Columbia Street with the Fraser River behind. Because people buy products through me and other apps online, traditional retail is closing down in droves. In the United States, 155 million square feet of retail closed down in 2019 alone, and the trend is not changing. I plan to take over these disused spaces in cities and inject them with the activity that happens on the Quix2Pick app. Let's take a look at the existing site and building. From left to right, there's Columbia Street, then the Army and Navy building, a parking lot behind, an elevated parkade behind that with Front Street running below it, train tracks, a public park, and then the Fraser River. In this model, we can see that Columbia Street connects to the parkade at the back by way of the footbridge, allowing pedestrians to circulate freely around the site. The building has large storefront windows all along the facade facing Columbia Street. This presents an exciting opportunity for displays to happen here. At the back, there is this large facade facing the parkade with lots of potential for views and spectacle. The large parking lot provides an excellent area for the flagship's more utilitarian requirements like truck access and loading zone. Before getting to the proposal, let's look at the users. These include resident influencers, consumers, and Quicks-to-Pick employees. Resident influencers are sponsored by brands to live at the flagship, use all of the brand's products, and educate consumers about them. Here, for example, is OK Family. They are sponsored by OK Furniture Warehouse and live in the OK showrooms at Quicks-to-Pick. Influencers don't live in the building, but they come here to take photos for their Quicks-to-Pick accounts on our selfie stages and partner with various brands. Here is Abiba's boy, wearing a full Abiba's outfit and ready to pose. Consumers are members of the general public who come to Quicks-to-Pick flagship to meet influencers and look at products, have a coffee in our cafe, and browse selfie stages where they might want to do a photo shoot themselves. Consumers can become influencers too, after all. Quicks-to-Pick employees keep the flagship running. They set up new products and scenes daily to make sure everything is ahead of trend. And here is the Quicks-to-Pick flagship, as viewed from the south side. The solid wall at the back has been replaced with a window wall to reveal the activity inside. The floors have been cut back to create variable height spaces where selfie stages and the influencer residences will be built. On the top of the building, we have inserted our Jumbotron billboard, and on the right is our Trash Chute Cafe. Let's look at each part in this axonometric diagram, where I will highlight the major building elements. The floor plates are accessible to all users and host the residences and selfie stages that I mentioned. Escalators provide the main circulation through the flagship. The Jumbotron billboard on the top of the building displays our users' Quicks-to-Pick images taken inside the flagship. The full height space at the back of the building acts as a machine alley, and the adjacent garage is the loading bay. This translucent tube on the northeast side of the building is a permanent construction chute. When set and showroom pieces have been used, they can be thrown out by way of the chute. Within the double walls is a cafe seating area where visitors can enjoy a coffee and watch the view. Let's look at each part in more detail. At the flagship, OK Furniture has leased space to construct their influencer residences. Here, influencers live in these rooms that are open and inviting to the public. Consumers can come in and look at the products and see how the influencers are using them in a real, authentic way. The rooms are temporary constructions, as they must always be new to be relevant. In the plan, we can see how some of the rooms face the street through the storefront windows, putting the influencers on display. We can also see the selfie stages set up amongst the residences, creating a field condition of branded backdrops and living spaces. Below the construction chute is a pile of all the used and now outdated pieces that get thrown away and shipped to the landfill. Quicks-to-Pick flagship reveals the turnover and fast fashion of consumption and turns it into a spectacle to enjoy. In this rendering, we can see the view of the influencer's bedroom from Columbia Street. The public can also pass through the inside, looking at products and interacting with the influencer. These spaces are what theorist Jean Baudrillard refers to as simulacrum, or models of a real without origin or reality, a hyperreal. Or in our words, perfectly on-trend homes and sets to create the ideal appearance online. If a consumer wishes to purchase any of the products that the influencer is using, they can simply tap the barcode with their Quicksta chip, and it will be sent to their address. Quicksta chip is a microchip embedded under the skin that not only allows users to shop, but also tracks their age, gender, location, speech, and heart rate. This helps Quicksta consistently create exactly what users want to see. Amidst the influencer residences are also the selfie stages I mentioned. Let's take a look using the transverse section. Selfie stages are scenes and backdrops where consumers and influencers can go to get the perfect shot and post it on Quicksta to construct their desired identity. For example, in front of a Hummer. It might not be a real Hummer, it's not, but it looks like a Hummer, and that's all that matters for an image. These spaces let users have the lived experience behind the Quicksta post. This reveals the disjuncture between what philosopher Henri Lefebvre refers to as spatial practice, or the lived experience, and representations of space, or the images on Quicksta. Consumerism is fueled by this disjuncture or antagonism, as consumers continually strive to achieve the representation, but are always left with the mismatching lived experience. The influencer's represented identity on Quicksta is the desired commodity. But it is unattainable because it only exists as representation, meaning it is unattainable even to the influencer themselves. This unattainability drives the need for constantly having new contents to placate consumers. That's why we have a 24/7 construction and demolition crew working around the clock to create scenes with new products and backdrops. Whatever is viral at the moment is what you will see here. This theater of activity can be observed through the south facade, the direction we are looking from now. When products and props have been used and no longer have value, they are disposed of through this trash chute on the side of the building and into the dumpster below, where they are then taken to landfill. Here's an exterior view of it from the pedway connecting Columbia Street and the parkade. Visitors can enjoy a coffee in the Trash Chute Cafe as they watch the pieces fall past them. This cycle of parts and pieces is essential to keep Quicksta running. As Baudrillard asserts, the consumer buys the part for the whole, or in our words, consumes something for the identity, the true desired commodity. The secret to good commodities is to make them unattainable. Therefore, here at the flagship, the identity doesn't really exist. The building never accumulates to a whole that is greater than the sum of the parts. There is no whole, only an endless flow of parts. Now let's look at the Jumbotron. We can see it here in the north-south section. The inside accommodates our research team, who examine the surveillance images of everyone in the building to serve them better. The outside of the Jumbotron displays our final product, images. This is a manifestation of Guy Debord's apt description of commodity fetishism, which is the domination of society by intangible as well as tangible things, which reaches its absolute fulfillment in the spectacle, where the tangible world is replaced by a selection of images which exist above it and which simultaneously impose themselves as the tangible par excellence. In other words, put it on Quicksta or it never happened, even if it never happened. Take Abiba's Boy, for example. This selfie stage and his outfit are sponsored by Abiba's. Here at the flagship, they can create their desired image and share it to Abiba's Boy's thousands of followers. The followers will probably buy the outfit in an attempt to be like him. Behind him, Jenny 26 is taking a photo on this beach scene where it looks like she's on vacation in Bali. This helps build the represented identity she wants to project online. Hopefully her followers think it's cool. Maybe some travel companies will think it's cool too. and she can start to sell her identity and get paid. Next to these sets is a resident influencer's kitchen. This kitchen can be used to prepare food, but its most productive function is to produce images of food. None of these people really have the life they are representing, but at Quixtapic, we are pushing for the domination of the economy over social life, which is brought to fruition by the obvious degradation of being to having, which then slides from having to appearing, because the only value of having things is to be seen with them. These spaces at Quixtapic are inventing a new real without origin. Through the veracity of our representations of space and identity, we begin to take over lived experience, or as Baudrillard says, begin to threaten the distinction between the true, the false, the real, and the imaginary. The Quixtapic flagship is the reflection of our contemporary retail condition. We know the value of individual identity and how to construct it and monetize it for consumption. The flagship gives a unique opportunity for the economic, social, and power dynamics of Quixtapic to exist in physical space. In doing so, it reveals the discrepancy between lived experience and the representations of it, illuminating the machine that fuels the construction and consumption of representations of space and the people flattened within them. We can't wait to see you at the grand opening. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Carla.
Thanks. So that was the presentation. I was also going to show another page, so I'm just trying to get over the full screen view. So thank you for listening. I also just wanted to show this Instagram page as an index, showing some of my drawings and early research. I just wanted to briefly touch on that my project started by researching architectural typologies of retail space, how they have always been designed to entrap the consumer through every type, from the department store to grocery store, shopping mall, big box store, destination mall, and then buildings becoming scaffoldings for ads, and then to our current condition of existing online. So just digging into how retail space has aggressively shaped our cities as well as our society and norms and public spaces. My three main theory sources are Society of the Spectacle by Guy Debord, as I mentioned multiple times, Jean Baudrillard's Simulacra and Simulation, as well as the Consumer Society, and looking at Henri Lefebvre's triad of spaces, or spatial triad, which he talks about in his text, The Production of Space. And yeah, I'll leave it at that. I'll leave this up as an index, and let me know if you would like me to go back to any drawings for discussion. Thank you.
Carla, I can't. It's an amazing project, and your text was amazing. Your delivery, you are an influencer, and so I think it's really, an interesting commentary, right? So, but you never broke the voice of that, like that whole platform, that whole, and so I hear within it a critique. So the theorist that you're bringing from, kind of an earlier period of contestation and push against the capitalist project and understanding space and capitalism and image and sign are kind of the lead into understanding your critical voice within that. and yet I think that it's so it leaves it to us to kind of interpret that it becomes a project that's actually a critique of the entire system. So yeah, so I think that that just works well. So perhaps maybe I'm going to maybe have I want to come back to it, and I wanted to start kind of with that thought and see if anyone else wants to move in that realm for a bit, and then maybe in a kind of a second part of the discussion to maybe probe behind that that delivery and to think yourself of other ways that your work itself is a critique and how you might push that even further, because I think it's a very powerful project, really quite extraordinary. I mean, down to every aspect of it, this idea of the dump and so anyway, I just wanted to like wondering if that's a way to maybe think about the two parts.
Okay,
What do
thank
you
you.
think of that? Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I use the satirical tone and voice mostly for the presentation and delivery, as you mentioned. And yeah, it definitely is a critical project or a critical architecture. And my aim is to reveal this phenomenon or a flattening of identity through drawing it in architectural space to then reveal it. And in doing so, produce a potential unraveling, I guess. Yeah. Sorry, I lost my train of thought, but yeah, that's what it is.
You held together a very, very extensive and long train of thought, so it's not. So
I'm quite, I'm really intrigued by the Front Street versus Fraser River sides to this, where the section or the elevation, I'm not sure exactly what it is, of the parkade side with the bridge and the river behind. Like, it's absolutely fascinating drawing, and I just I love getting into it, and I'm glad that you've kind of honed in on the different sections of it. But it does seem to me that like there's an opportunity that on the front, you're coming to this and you're wanting to buy. And then if you were able to bring people around on the bridge or the parkade, they would you would kind of see the guts of the fakeness.
Yeah.
And so whether that's a journey that people want to take or whether they stumble upon it, or I don't know, but like that, for me, there's a real richness in that awareness or self-awakening. I really, I love the way that you didn't get out. Like, I thought I was going to invest in this by the end of it, quite honest. So thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah, Carla, I also, I mean, I really appreciate that you've taken this subject matter on and you presented it in such a articulate and comprehensive manner. And I find there to be some really amazing, multiple amazing moments in your project. But it raises so many questions in a really great way. And one question I have, and I'm curious what you think about this and what the other panelists think about it, is, I mean, the capitalist consumerist system is sort of legend in its ability to absorb all manner of critique, right? Incredibly agile and incredibly adaptive. And I just wonder about the form of critique. Clearly your project is a critique, and how the critique is somehow retrograde, right? And therefore in its retrogradness is maybe not as effective as it could be. And I mean, this is kind of holding you to a high standard. It's like, how do we, I mean, these systems are seemingly so total and so comprehensive, it's hard for anyone to launch an effective critique. So, it's not to necessarily say this is the weakness of you, but or your project, but I wonder, I mean, I'm not an expert in the kind of theorization of social media and kind of image consumption, but it strikes me that the kind of methods of something like Instagram and the influencer world in Instagram kind of traffics in the world of authenticity, the kind of production of seemingly authentic moments that are aspirational, and that those moments achieve their authenticity by the perception that they are happening actually in Bali, right? Like I want to go to Bali because this beautiful yoga man is striking this incredible pose. And it's like, oh, that's way better than my mundane life as an architect in Vancouver. And I need to believe in some way, right? So the kind of production of a studio in which I can go and see the fakeness kind of is, I mean, the project is totally critical in that way, but it's not I would offer, like, is it a viable critique? And it's because you're making a theme park. I mean, I think the kind of question of the theme park is quite interesting here, and the kind of role of the idea of Disneyland and the theme park in the history of architecture and simulation. But I wonder that there are some other glitches in the matrix, so to speak, that are beyond that like that the theme park is not a territory in which a meaningful critique is viable anymore, and there's kind of new difficult to locate kind of glitches, so to speak, that can be exploited. I love that your project is making me think about this morning, but yeah, I just want to see what your thoughts are about that, and then what other people on the panel's thoughts are about that.
Okay, yeah, I'll try to answer as best as I can. I think I see what you're getting at. Yeah, in terms of it being a critique or like making any sort of change, the major point is that by revealing how these images are created, it begins to serve to deconstruct them. And then in addition to that, this is something I didn't get to in the scope of this project, but if I were to continue it, this is where I would want to push it. I find it really interesting that although there's been this flattening where brands kind of start to buy people, in a sense, for the first time, the consumer has the capability to be the producer in the sense that they can also produce these images. They can garner popularity online. Usually it's through in motivation of money, but they can have a voice online. So in an extreme sense, and to use like the language of the theorists I'm working with, I do think there's like a potential to seize the means of production, so to speak, and essentially change what is being produced to reflect different values. I think that's really hard within the framework of capitalism and consumerism, as it's all being driven by money and who's getting paid by who, as I sort of talked about at the beginning. But yeah, I definitely sort of was thinking about those dynamics most of the semester.
I just want to follow up really, really quickly. Like I wonder, thank you for that answer. But like I wonder about something like, let's say, deep fake technology. Like it seems to me that like a large aspect of this is a kind of question of realism and really the interface between kind of bodies and technology and virtuality. And I wonder if there's maybe, because you're in an art, you're maybe too stuck on a kind of idea of a building. It's a question. I'm not saying you are. I wonder, right, if there's a way in that pushes your idea, or not a way in, but a new kind of plateau around your ideas that kind of really delves deeply into this kind of question of physical reality, virtual reality, and the kind of hybrid around this question of kind of authenticity and simulation, that maybe produce something like just extremely kind of yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure what it would produce, but I'm curious about that. I'll leave it at that.
I guess I have a question related to that, Matthew and Carla. I think you've done an amazing job creating really wonderful graphics. The sections are beautiful. a very beautiful and rigorous representation of these three theorists' work, Baudrillard, Lefebvre, and Guy. But then I wonder, so you very faithfully have represented their theories, but I think that's where architecture comes in. And then what? It's one thing to represent these theories that we all know, and I think you're doing it in a somewhat postmodern way, being facetious, almost sarcastic, and critical that way. But then the idea that architecture is actually real and tangible, and it goes beyond theory. It creates a practice and a tangible, something tangible in the environment. I wonder, have you thought about how your project breaks beyond just a summary of these theorists that many of us have read, and how it takes on a life of its own as architecture in a sincere way?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So its primary function, like you said, is to sort of reveal and represent these theories and this new condition of consumerism or retail that exists. I will say I definitely have an interest in public space, and the project actually started with more of a fascination of that, looking at how much space retail actually takes up in the city, these huge swaths of spaces that are now closing down so aggressively. It's really leaving a hole in the built environment. And in North America, public space is very much contingent on the capitalist system and also sort of like our obsession with consumerism. So we don't have as many sort of publicly funded public spaces as, say, like European countries. So retail is really like our public space, and rather than it completely going online and disappearing, I wanted to create a physical space so that if nothing else, there is still a public space in the city where people can go to sort of like at least observe culture, to have a coffee, or just like sit down on furniture, use a public bathroom, come inside from the respite of the rain. Yeah, just to sort of keep the typology alive, if nothing else, than for an engaging public space.
So do you see an active role in your project in actually dismantling the hyper consumerism, the hyperreal, the Disneyland, I guess, as Baudrillard would say, that Instagram and other communities online are creating?
Yeah, so the intention is that the people who enter this building see the lived reality behind the representation of space. Back to Lefebvre's spatial triad, observe this antagonism and between them that is fueling consumerism, and sort of lead to this awakening or idea, realization, and from there an unraveling. So it's putting it all in one place for people to see it for what it is.
And that just leads me right into just my second comment. Sorry. But so you mentioned these people coming into the space, but aside from maybe that chip diagram, which was also very beautiful, I feel like we skipped seeing what the product of your vision is, which is that autopoetic nature of this architecture that you've contrived in creating these users that come in and then come out of your project. What do those users look like? You know, there's like that autopoetic nature in which then they try to either become influencers, or they try to completely reject the system. And I'd be interested really to know what those people look like after they come out of your project. You know, are they selfie sticking on top of glaciers and falling into waterfalls and dying, or do they actually realize that it's a shoot made to simulate Bali, or whatever? But have you thought about the users, is what I mean, and how do they look?
Yeah, there's sort of like two edges to my answer, I think. So because it's satirical within this like world I've created and I'm representing, the users are they're sort of taken into the system, and they're not really I'm not drawing them kind of having this realization, but from as existing as a project, as a thesis project, and as like a as us as the audience would be the users that I'm trying to inform, and maybe our behaviors will change. And so within the project, the sinister implication is that the users might enter and actually not leave. They may be taken over by a brand and stay there and live in the OK showroom forever.
I'm a bit fascinated by the worker in this scenario. Like in the department store, you rarely see I mean, you might see a salesperson on the floor or a cashier. You never see so much the back of house, or you can imagine a hotel, you never see the service corridor side of it. And yet in this building, you have no way of avoiding that. And you referenced them in the beginning as one of the groups. And it'd be lovely to see how they exist and like what the staff room might be like for them, or the lunchroom, or even if they get such, like I'm thinking of like in the Amazon warehouses. I don't know if this is a fact, but I've heard rumors that like the actual humans that work in those installations have to be protected kind of in these cage structures as they're whisked around on robot machines so that they don't get hurt by falling boxes. You know, like there's a kind of a spectacle about even just the way they're going to interact. And I'd love to know how that plays out for these individuals.
Great. Yeah, I was yeah, sort of inspired by like a theater of constant construction. I did like my early research again. I was inspired by the very early department stores like the Bon Marché in Paris. The employees actually lived in the store in a dormitory, mostly like young women, and this was like their first way to enter into the urban landscape as single women. And then also, yeah, just thinking about stores like even like Home Depot, where there's the consumers, but there's also this constant back and forth of forklifts and moving product around that we like it's right in front of us, but we might ignore it. So yeah, trying to enhance that in my project again to reveal this kind of back end system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in the Home Depot example, it's like, you know, the stuff is flying off our shelves so quickly that we have to constantly replenish it, right?
Yeah.
It's almost part of the myth.
And almost build on the spectacle of the worker as well. I mean, if you think of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, the Oompa Loompas are singing and making a spectacle of them literally changing and arranging the set in the film, the original film.
Right.
So that's just one additional maybe possibility to really amplify the spectacle of that worker and how they are demolishing and building sets in front of your eye.
I would like to ask you a question, although I know your project extremely well since we held consultations over the course of the semester. With the way you presented your final project is like a kind of Brechtian theater, where people who usually indulge in the Instagram spectacle or the spectacle of your application come to see the workings of this theater and have kind of a participation relationship to it, where they not only indulge, but by seeing the workings, establish some kind of a distance from the entire spectacle. And your final, like that volume on top, reminded me of the Fly Tower, the place where all the magic happens, but you never see it. In which way would you interpret your entire construct as a kind of theater?
Okay, yeah, good question. I think it's a theater on multiple levels. So there's the theater of the influencers, this kind of performative space where they're using these products and interacting with customers. It's sort of like the typical salesperson in a store. Do they really believe in the product, or are they just trying to sell it to you, telling you all the benefits of it? There is the theater of construction, like we talked about, this constant replenishing, this like insatiable consumerism that manifests in these sort of ridiculous, like the trash chute and this enormous amount of product just like moving constantly. And then sort of like I guess, I don't know if you'd call it like the fourth wall, but us as the audience viewing the thesis project, it is supposed to be a theater of our current condition.
Thank you.
I said that I'd kind of start this first question of like talking within the project. And I think the comment of this being a theater is really apropos. I actually just wanted to ask you about the use of the term sarcasm in the project. I don't know that that is precisely what you're doing. And so I think perhaps satirical, or I'd actually challenge the language of that, because sarcasm would be, well, I mean, perhaps it's there, perhaps, and you can answer best, that the sarcasm would be a kind of looking down on, a derision or contempt or something like that, which then is not seen in the presentation, which was kind of just so smooth, and this is how this world is. So I guess the invitation for the, kind of this last 15 minutes, I'm just curious about, the counter project. Is there like some kind of, if this is matter and there's dark matter, is there something that's like opposing that you imagine? This kind of like, if this, like, I actually think this posits itself as this kind of utopic vision, but it's quite dystopic. And is there some other, something else operating? I almost feel like there's going to be like, Alice through the looking glass, like some,
Right.
This kind of line of the river or the line of the street. I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of this street, but this kind of mirroring, like I actually, it's actually, and you challenge us to think in a very different way. Like what, does it stay, does your critique, it's a critical project, it's satirical, what are those other terms but those terms are always about operations, right? That you can upend, right? So I'm thinking of, even the use of caricature, or even, here in US, just with this kind of whole crazy trip we've been on with the elections and so forth, that, many people were saying, how do you counter, the face of someone like Trump? How do you counter that with laughter or humor? Or so there's like humor. So I can't really, I don't really have an answer. I'm just kind of, it's making me think about if the project is kind of positing itself, because there are parts that are like utterly absurd, utterly normalized, and then utterly absurd in the project, right? And so we have that kind of gratification, and we know that it sits in that realm, right? What is that other way? Do you picture yourself coming in and critiquing the project? And I don't know what that answer is. And then perhaps the question is the spatial one, right? So that, thinking of the challenge of, I keep thinking that the public who would come to this place wouldn't perhaps be so obedient to just sort of stay to the side. Like I can imagine, kind of disruptions, like in the OK Furniture, right? So that you're always seeing people sprawling throughout like the beds and couches, and where is that overlap? Is it, and it's making me think of zoos, like this idea of kind of trying to present the tableau, the living tableau, it's like highly orchestrated, where there's a division between the public and the occupants, and the front of house, back of house. I think the theater is, and the fly space, I think, is really, really quite a good one, to think like what hides behind all of that. Just making me think of films as well, which I'm not even remembering the name of some of them, but you know, I'm thinking of the one where Tom Hanks is in the airport, you know, arrives in the airport and lives there. Just this kind of simulation of like those real spaces. And you know, it's frightening, and you're kind of relating at the beginning, and I'm listening to your conversations. I know exactly what you want, and reassuring, and those things, like it is where we are, right? That they do. I sat at a review last year, and I looked down at the phone. It's a suggestion of, you know, offering a friend link to the person who's sitting right next to me. Like, anyway, on a, you know, LinkedIn platform. So anyway, I really appreciate the project, because it's, you know, really beautifully executed. It's like very, very detailed to the nth degree, like that, you know, I love like the way that you create the spaces. So even like from a graphic point of view, or, you know, the density of all of the discarded, you know, absolutely perfectly usable things that are discarded, and the open spaces, the way that you're creating enough physical room for the camera to somehow have the distance from the girl who's in, you know, the beach. And, you know, anyway, I think that it more than any conclusion, I'm really appreciative of, you know, triggering the sets of questions. But I think that a project like this, or Thesis, is always a question to me, you know, a question that you want to keep working with. So I almost feel like in the first project, when Nick is saying, here's my thesis statement, I think he just kept biting around that. You know, it's the kind of thing that I can imagine meeting you in 10 years. It's like, I'm still biting on that thing, you know. Like, to me, a great thesis is something that's just like, you don't quite have the answer, you have the intuition, you kind of go all in, and you're just like, I think this is a problem, and it's just a problem that's going to get under my skin and keep me, you know, because then you stay, you know, kind of in that realm that everything that you encounter becomes like your work. It becomes your outlook. And so I think, yeah, so back to that, like, mirror Alice through the looking glass kind of thing, like those kind of, anyway, so it's kind of long-winded, but
in the spirit of, I couldn't agree more, Alicia. I mean, in the spirit of continuing to chew on this, I mean, I think I really appreciate that you you know, brought Baudrillard, Debord, and Lefebvre to the table. I think those are undoubtedly important kind of figures for you to be interested in and fueled by, so to speak. But I would encourage you, and maybe you've done this already and just haven't spoken about it today. You only have a pretty finite amount of time, but to well, you know, capitalism is, I mean, it's such a big term, right? And I mean, of course, capitalism is always changing, and it changes from place to place and time to time. So really, there are many capitalisms. And, you know, Debord and Lefebvre were writing quite a while ago, and capitalism has changed significantly since then. And I don't think they are adequate theoreticians alone to really continue to chew on this and develop it. So I would just encourage you to kind of extend your kind of theoretical content closer into the present, and to look at kind of things like, you know, I mean, there's agricultural capitalism, industrial capitalism, consumer capitalism, but there's all these capitalisms like neurocapitalism, cognitive capitalism. I mean, there's kind of a comical list of neologisms around capitalism, but I would encourage you to look at people who are writing about cognitive capitalism and neurocapitalism, and maybe someone to look at the kind of tradition of Italian autonomism, and someone like Bifo Berardi, I think would be helpful for you to look at. Someone who's really carrying a kind of Marxist critique into the present with a focus on kind of new technologies and digital life. And I think that kind of lineage of how someone like Marx's ideas get reformulated around the particular kind of questions of the now, which you're so focused on. I think that'll be helpful for you.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a really great suggestion.
I was just going to make one, it's a sort of an aside really, but it struck me, one of the things that's interesting are these houses that are taken over by influencers, and the kind of conflation of these so-called influencers on Instagram first of all, they make a lot of money, so they buy, but their instinct is to kind of presume a kind of slightly old-fashioned idea of celebrity. So you get like a 1920s house in Beverly Hills that all of a sudden is, you know, it's like the 16 Irishmen that we saw earlier today, you know, end up in there taking videos of one another doing relatively outrageous things, but being paid for it because they're wearing Adidas or whatever it is. And I wonder whether there's something about your point of departure being the idea of retail commercial space as it somehow came to represent a kind of publicness in the city, and so you're I think bringing up the idea of theater is a good one, but one could also say that Bon Marché was a kind of theater, and you kind of wonder if you were to escape that trajectory of the kind of historical dimension of consumer space, what it would, where you would arrive at that might be in a kind of different, I hate to use the word, but kind of stylistic milieu. Because I mean, it's almost as if, you know, you start to think about the kind of interface with the so-called participants in your project, and you present it as if they're on a commercial high street and they come in a kind of plate glass window and then they come through, I don't know, a revolving door and then they're in. But actually, if you think about the mechanisms of this world, they probably need to win a lottery, you know, and so 10 people are allowed in this building, and you know, for a day, and there's, do you know what I mean? It would be already kind of co-opted into being a kind of another kind of experience. There's an old article by Charles Moore about Disneyland back in the day when it was the original Disneyland, and it was called "You Have to Pay for the Public Life." It's a kind of shocking read, but it was his assertion that that's where we're at. And Disneyland itself is a kind of the old Disneyland in Anaheim is a kind of curious place because it's been absorbed by different kind of cultural phenomena, much the same way that, I don't know, Central Park has. But last time I was there, it had become a kind of place for mostly adolescent Latinas to go and kind of get away from their sort of familial control. And so they'd go, your kind of first date would be to go and watch the fireworks at the end of the day at Disneyland. But I do think that issue of how we as participating in this strange and exotic culture actually do come into contact with the protagonists, I think is really a curious and interesting topic. So anyway, lovely presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
I just wanted, I wanted to ask you also about something that might be interesting to take further in your project is thinking about the invisible consequences or the invisible economies, the invisible users that emerge from this, the project that you proposed. So obviously gentrification, replacing the Army and Navy, the landfill impacts, and the alienation people who maybe are not able to participate might feel, and how those might manifest themselves not only in the public environment around the project, but also somebody mentioned inside the project that maybe the antagonisms you might experience as a result from the invisible consequences of the project.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. Great question. I was very much thinking about these aspects that you just brought up in the earlier part of the semester. And for a long time, I was on a track much more oriented towards providing amenities to the public, because I was looking at retail as, although it's this, the primary function is this consumer role, I was looking at sort of externalities or offshoots of retail, in that while not a perfect system, they do still provide public restrooms, heating and cooling, a overhang to rest under, and certainly the like the homeless population in New Westminster, there is definitely like a presence on that street of that and this dynamic happening. I would have really liked to engage with that, but I think it sort of became outside the scope of this project's focus, became more narrow. If I were to explore it further, I would, I would like to expand on sort of that idea of amenities, and maybe these like, how is the showroom housing is maybe like supportive in some way rather than gentrifying, but yeah.
So in the end, what a fantastic conversation. Thanks for a wonderful presentation, Carla. In the interest of time, we should wrap up, but I would like to invite Bill, if he, as the chair for your project, to say anything in closing.
Yeah, Carla, I want to extend my congratulations to you. You know, the kind of discussion that a project fosters is an indication of its success. And I have a feeling that you've opened up layers of things for us to think about that we will carry with us for a long time. And I hope it's the same for you. It's been a delight to work with you and to have just see and to observe you finding this amazing voice, because I also taught you in first year. So congratulations, and we'll speak a little bit later to download, you know, this content. But congratulations.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you everyone for all your comments.
Fantastic. Thank you, Carla. Okay, so we have one more student.